Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jane Stevens. I'm the training manager here at Zolo, and today we're going to be talking about working with sellers. There is so much to talk about when we're talking about listings and working with sellers, but we're going to break it down today, and I'm going to focus on paperwork, actually, is what we're going to focus on today. So once you have that listing, what happens next? Where do you go from there? So let's jump in and get started. First of all, hello, I just want to welcome everybody to today's webinar. I will launch a quick poll just so that I can get to know my audience here a little bit. So if you don't mind, I will continue to admit people here while I launch this poll. So I'd just love to hear from you just to get a better understanding, of course, of who I'm speaking to today. So how long have you been licensed for? Have you done any leases? Have you done any buyer transactions? And of course, we're talking about sellers today. So have you done any listings? Have you worked with sellers before? Yeah, chat with me. Definitely in the chat. If you guys want to talk to me, just raise your hand and I can unmute you and we can interact. So yes, this is a virtual webinar, but yes, let's make it as interactive as possible. So I will leave a poll up here for 30 seconds. And while you're answering those questions, I will just pull up the training calendar. So this is available to you in Workplace under the training channel. And you can see here that we offer a new agent orientation every Monday and Wednesday. Keep in mind that's not just for new agents. You know, if you're a seasoned agent, you have experience here at Zolo, still come back, tune in to the CRM training on Monday. We talk about all things CRM related. And then of course on Wednesday, we follow that up with web forms. So, you know, once you convert those calls to showings and somebody actually wants to put an offer in on something, how do you go about preparing that? So we talk about web forms on Wednesday. And then of course on Tuesday, we have a lineup of leases, working with buyers, working with sellers, and then customer service at the end of the month. On Thursday, I usually have a guest speaker join me. And tomorrow, we're actually going to piggyback on today's training, and we're going to talk about listing strategies. And I will be joined by a few of the team leaders here at Zolo, the growth managers. So that's going to be a really informative session, tips and tricks and strategies that work in getting listings, talking to sellers. But again, today we're going to be focusing on a piece of that. So we'll definitely be expanding on this topic later this week. All right, so let me take a look at this poll. I'll leave it for 8 more seconds here. I've got about half of you who have voted. So if you haven't voted, please do so. And I will take a look. All right, thanks so much for answering, you guys. So it looks like I have about 40% of you who have been licensed for less than a year. So welcome to Zolo, welcome to real estate. And then I have another 30% of you who have been licensed for less than 5 years. So it's always nice to see seasoned agents joining these sessions as well. How many leases have you done? So it looks like the majority, again, we've got a split group here. We've got some people who have done less than 2, and then the other majority 10 plus leases. So that is awesome. We have, again, similar to that with how many buyers have you worked with. I've got about 38% of you who haven't worked with buyers yet. And then I also have, 23 who have done 10 plus transactions. So amazing. Today we're talking about sellers. So it's really great for me to see that it looks like 77% of you have done less than 2 listings. So that's what we're talking about today. So that's, again, just really helpful for me to know. So let's get started. Today we're working with sellers. That's our topic. So all of this information can be found, or different webinars can be found through the Academy. So make sure that you're logging into your CRM. And under the tools drop-down menu, that's where you'll find your Academy. And there's a whole bunch of useful information there for you. All of the courses broken down in list view. You can also take a look at our Facebook workplace group. And then of course you do have access to all of the previous recorded webinars on our YouTube channel. So there's links there for you guys to explore. But let's talk about sellers today. I'm doing it a little bit differently than I've done it before. So again, as I mentioned at the beginning here, there are so many things to talk about when we're talking about working with sellers. Specifically, where are these sellers going to come from, right? How do we generate listing leads? So that's definitely a topic all on its own. Then, of course, we can talk about the pre-listing package, right? What are you going to do after that lead has come into your CRM? Maybe you've had a conversation with a lead. What do you do after that conversation and before the actual listing presentation? So again, that's a whole other topic on its own. A pre-listing presentation, might include your biography, like a little bit about you, making it personable, sending an email with some information about the market, stats, all that kind of stuff, kind of preparing them for the listing appointment. Then, of course, we have the listing appointment. What do you bring with you? What do you talk about? How do you share comparables? How do you pull comparables? How do you share them with your sellers? And then, of course, what do you do once you get the yes? Once you get that listing agreement signed, what is it that you do from there? So that's really what we're going to focus on today. But I will touch on all of these things just in case you haven't worked with sellers before and you really want to kind of know everything from A to Z. I will definitely touch on these things, but the focus today will be on actually listing a property. So we will be talking about paperwork, but then we'll come back and we'll touch on what to do, once you have an accepted offer, and then what you do once it's closed. So as you can see, there's lots to talk about with listings. So we will focus on the paperwork. But before we do, I'm just going to quickly touch on where these listing leads are coming from. And of course, here at Zolo, we're very fortunate that we have leads coming into our CRM every day. You get notified by email and by text that you do have somebody who's interested in a property. So typically speaking, they come to us as buyer leads, right? But once we start showing properties, we have that initial conversation with a buyer lead that's come in, we take them out, we show them properties, and then usually it's during the course of showing them a few properties that we discover they also have a property to sell. So that's usually how you're going to come across a listing lead here at Zolo. There's of course a whole bunch of different, ways to generate listing leads. We've talked about this in previous webinars. You can send out buyer letters if you have a buyer who you're representing who's looking for a particular property, especially right now. We're in a seller's market, inventory is low, so you may need to use these, creative ways of, generating listings for yourself, and at the same time, hopefully finding something that is of interest to the buyers that you're working with. So a buyer letter is, something targeted that you can deliver to properties that meet a specific search criteria. And you can literally just write a handwritten note saying that you have a buyer interested in a property similar to theirs and have they thought about listing. So that's kind of an example of a buyer letter. We've talked in the past about cold calling. So, of course, again, we don't have to cold call here at Zolo, but if you did want to, double your efforts in the leads that you're getting from Zolo, you can also cold call. There are services out there such as telelisting, which I've talked about before. And that one's about, $300 a year, I think it is. And that gives you a list of home buyers, a list of people that, might be interested in learning about maybe what a property sold for. So, if you know of a property that's sold down the street from you, we have access, right? We have access to our MLS system. And we know this information, we know sold information before the public does generally. So you can very quickly, do a search in something like telelisting by postal code and then reach out to those individual people and advise them on what a property down the street sold for, right? So again, that's another way of potentially generating listings. Of course, hopefully you have a database, you're keeping track of, everybody that you've spoken to. Maybe you're doubling those efforts with some direct mail. You've picked a neighborhood that you want to farm and you're sending out, direct mail outs. So that's probably the pricier thing, to do in generating listings, but it works. I'm sure you guys all get mail from realtors sending out direct mail. So there's lots of different ideas there. Again, this could be a whole topic all on its own, because yes, where do you get leads? Where do you get listing leads? Here at Zolo, we're fortunate that we can talk to buyers, and oftentimes we discover that they also have a property to sell. So once you do have that conversation with a buyer, and you do realize that they have a property to sell, hopefully you're making that appointment, right? To go to see their home, to do a walkthrough, to determine, what upgrades they've done to the property since purchasing it. But then of course, there's that stage in between that initial phone call or a conversation that you've had and that listing appointment where you might want to send out a pre-listing package. So a pre-listing package, also we've talked about this before, what might that include? And it might include, things like what's happening in the market right now, right? You, of course, will need to prepare a comparative market analysis. You'll want to pull up properties that are currently on the market that are similar to the property you're hoping to list. You'll also want to pull up properties that have recently sold, because that's going to give you a good idea as to what this property might sell for. And then of course, you also want to pull up some terminated listings, right? To see what might have been priced too high and what didn't sell. So you're not going to share that with your potential sellers during this stage, during the pre-listing stage. This is your time to prepare for your listing presentation. So printing out 3 active properties, 3 sold properties, and 3 terminated properties will give you a really good idea as to what you should recommend to your sellers to potentially list at. But of course that may change, right? If you do the listing presentation and you walk through and they haven't done any renovations, that might change what your advice is. Of course, if they've done the opposite and they've renovated bedrooms and bathrooms and there's an extension on the house, then again, you might have a different price point to suggest, right? So at this stage, the pre-listing preparation is for you to prepare the comparables, but yes, you might want to send them a pre-listing package, right? Maybe you have some sort of a buyer's guide, which definitely, I always recommend having something that explains the process, because that is going to start to build trust. They're going to start to trust you as, being a knowledgeable professional realtor. And really that's going to, have them choose you over, really experience. If you are able to explain the process, even though you haven't sold 20 homes before, if you're able to build that trust, that's going to help them choose you at the end of the day. So this is an important step when working with sellers, because you definitely want to start building that rapport, that relationship, that trust. So you definitely want to be sending them material that is going to educate them on the process. So you're preparing them for this listing presentation. So lots of things to do here. Of course, reach out to your team leader or your growth manager if you are doing a comparable market analysis for the first time. We've talked about these in previous trainings, but definitely reach out to your growth manager or team leader and see what they might suggest as a price point, just so that you're kind of in the right ballpark. All right, so let's talk about that listing appointment. So definitely, I think this is something that a lot of us, when we first start, we jump right to having a listing presentation, right? But make sure that you also have a buyer presentation available, even a renter's guide, to explain the process, because this is often the thing we do first, and then it's usually the only thing that we start off with. And there's so many things that come before that. So let me just quickly talk about the listing presentation and what to bring with you to a potential seller's home. So of course, when you show up, you want to be bringing the paperwork with you. Don't forget that. You want to make sure that you have the paperwork ready to have signed, because if you have an amazing presentation with them, you tour their home, you have a good rapport with them, you're talking about their goals, you're talking about, what they might need to fix or finish up on their property in order to get it ready for listing. If you don't have that listing presentation, or sorry, that listing agreement available for them to sign, chances are that if you walk away, and you send them the listing agreement by Authentisign for electronic signature later, they may change their mind, right? They may get cold feet. They might, decide not to do it. So, bring that listing agreement with you, have it ready to go for them to sign, so that you're walking out of there with a contract. So that's probably the most important thing to bring to your listing presentation. So also, of course, bring those comparables that you prepared, those 3 active listings, those 3 terminated listings, those 3 sold listings, and have that available to present in a variety of different ways, because there are some sellers who are going to want a formal presentation. So bring your laptop, bring your iPad, whatever it is. If they're more of a sit back, cross their arms, kind of waiting for the presentation type audience, or if they're a little bit more casual, then maybe you also bring it, print it out so that you can talk about it and have more of a casual conversation. So definitely at the listing appointment, you want to be discussing price, you want to be discussing the market. Definitely right now, you want to be talking about maybe holding off on offers. That seems to be the trend. Or if they want to take offers anytime. So that's a strategy you can discuss with your clients. And of course, at the end of it all, hopefully you decide that, you do have a good rapport, you're able to communicate well, make some decisions during that listing appointment, and you get that listing agreement signed. Lastly, don't forget to bring a lockbox, because I think that that's such a power move. Once you do have that listing agreement signed, just let them know you're going to put the lockbox on the front door, and that's going to allow you to come back later. They don't need to be home. The key is already there in the lockbox for them, so that you can access the property with your photographer, with your stager, and all of that. So Definitely lots to go over in a listing appointment. The takeaway here is bring the paperwork, bring the paperwork and bring your comparables. All right. Okay, so I'm getting a few questions here before we jump into what I really wanted to focus on today, which is actually getting the listing. So now that you've had this conversation, now that you have, sent some material before the listing presentation and you visited the home, let's talk about what happens next. And I'm going to do a screen share with you guys so we can actually go over the paperwork. But yes, should we go first time just for checking the house and then second appointment we do the listing presentation in CMA? Yeah, so you can definitely do it that way. Usually, yes, you can do it both ways. So you can definitely do a visit, a walkthrough, and then now that you have a good visual of what the property is like, then you can go ahead and bring comparables. And oftentimes you might have to change your strategy that way because most of the time, you want to pull comparables. Maybe this property, so the subject property that you're hoping to list, hopefully, it is on MLS, you're able to take a look at it, and hopefully it's in the same or better condition than the photos on MLS. So you're able to pull some comparables in advance and show up with, a range to suggest, a list price to suggest. But if you show up at the property and they haven't done any renovations or it's in worse condition than it showed on MLS when they purchased it, or vice versa, if they've done renovations, then yes, you might want to adjust what you originally prepared. So if you find yourself in that position, you can just change your game plan, right? So show up at the property armed with comparables, but if the property shows much differently than what you expected, then just let them know that you'll have to redo the comparables and advise them on price afterwards. So yeah, you can do it all in one go or in 2 visits. All right, so let's talk about the listing. Oh, is there a listing checklist available to download somewhere? Yes, there are a ton. Where can we find the checklist? Absolutely. So there are a ton that you can find really on the internet. You can Google listing checklist. The one that I have here is something I just found online. So a lot of these are very Americanized, but you can change the lingo and include that in your listing presentation. So I always include, or I always recommend Breakthrough Broker, and I think they have checklists like that as well. So I'll just put that in the chat, breakthroughbroker.com, and they have some listing checklists that you can download because yes, there's a lot. So let's talk about what I really wanted to focus on today, which is the listing. So something, of course, you need to verify is who the homeowners are, and you can do that by checking GeoWarehouse. That will tell you who is on title, and that's actually something that should be done before you go to the listing presentation because you want to make sure that you are speaking to both homeowners, both decision makers. If you're just speaking to one, then you're not going to be able to get that listing agreement signed by both parties, right? If they're not both there. So do check who the owners are. Of course, you want to be reviewing those comparables again. So you do want to be reviewing, again, as I said, recently sold, terminated listings, active listings, so you know what your competition is. But if you've gone to that listing presentation and you and the sellers have decided that there's a little bit of work to do to the home, maybe they're going to repaint the front room, maybe they're going to finish that project they started in the basement, whatever it is, if now a couple of weeks have gone by and you're going to actually list the property 2 weeks later, definitely review those comparables that you originally discussed with the seller. So go over what has recently sold because you don't want it to be that you're relying on old comparables and something else sold 2 days ago that you're not aware of. So always stay on top of the comparables when you're listing a property. Of course, you'll also need to hire your photographer, right, who will typically, hopefully, also be the person to do your virtual tour. Hopefully, it's one of those 3D Matterport tours. Right now, people are relying a lot on virtual tours. And hopefully they do a floor plan for you as well. So, just offering all of those little extra pieces, it doesn't cost much more. You can find photographers who do all of it for, a couple $100. So do your research, find somebody who can help you in listing the property and marketing it professionally. If you talk about staging with your clients, you can have that discussion about, whether you're including that or whether they're paying for that. So hiring a staging company if necessary. Installing your yard sign, this is something that I find it's important to put in a checklist item. Otherwise, it's one of those things that you forget about. And it's so important because this is going to generate, hopefully, leads for you, right? And then of course you want to make sure that once everything is, you've got that yard sign, it says coming soon to MLS. The next step, of course, is going to be to enter it into MLS. So I will show you how to fill in those forms because I get a lot of questions about that. So we'll talk about the listing agreement. We'll talk about the MLS data information sheet, and I'm going to give you a quick shortcut on how to actually upload that to TREB. Once you do upload your listing to your MLS system, you will get an automatic email from Schedule Lock. If that doesn't happen, that's okay. Reach out to your growth manager, reach out to Schedule Lock, but that's going to be where you enter in your showing instructions. So just know that that happens automatically. So as soon as you list your property for sale on MLS, you will get notified by Schedule Lock that you need to enter in showing instructions, which means what's the lockbox code, when are showings going to be allowed, who's going to be notified of these showings. So this is not something you have to worry about manually. We have systems in place. You just need to set them up. And then of course, last but not least, we have marketing the property. So if you do want to send out postcards that say just listed, you can do that. Maybe you want to print out some fancy, feature sheets, property brochures that you're leaving on the property so that interested buyers can take that away with them. You might want to create a property website. So, I'm sure you've seen 123mainstreet.com. You might want to do that. That might be something that you're offering your sellers. So if you've promised that, deliver on that. Of course, you want to be advertising it not just on MLS, which of course feeds Realtor.ca and of course Zolo, but you do want to post maybe on social media as well. So you want to be posting on Facebook, Kijiji. At the end of the day, listings are great because they generate buyer leads. So hopefully you get people interested in that property, contacting you with more information. And of course, don't forget about posting it on Workplace, right? Tell your colleagues here at Zolo that you have a listing coming up and maybe somebody has a buyer who's looking, right? Especially right now, again, when inventory is low, it's really great if we can help each other when listings are coming up. And then of course, you might want to email your listing to your database, right? So hopefully you're keeping track of all of the conversations that you're having with leads. All right, so as I said, this is the part I wanted to focus on. So let me just do a quick flip, and I'm going to show you my screen so that I can log into TREB and show you how to do this in web forms, because of course, this is where I get a lot of the questions. And so of course, let me just log in here and let me know if you have any questions in the meantime. But when you're listing a property, if you can just verify that you can actually see my TREB homepage, that would be great. Let me know if you can see my TREB homepage. Yes, awesome. Okay, thank you. Perfect. So this is the homepage, and if you're listing a property, you're not going to go to that property on MLS. You're going to create a brand new transaction kit for your listing. Awesome. Okay, thanks for letting me know. You guys can see my screen. So all I've done is I've clicked on web forms, and that of course takes you to web forms. So again, this is different. You're creating a listing transaction kit, and you're not working with a buyer. So you're not pulling up that property on MLS. It's not on MLS. So you're going to go ahead and you're going to jump into web forms, and you're going to create a transaction. So clicking on that brings up this create transaction dialog box. So you want to go ahead and enter in the address of the property. So 123 Main Street. And then of course you want to enter in your seller's name in brackets. From here, this is kind of the question that I get all the time is how to set this up properly. So I'll just take a few minutes here to walk you through it. You want to be selecting the correct template. And there's a bunch of templates that you can choose from. We know that we are listing a property in this particular case. So you're going to choose one of these listing templates. And so of course you have condos, you have options. You have options if it's a condo or if it's a freehold, and if it's a lease or if it's a property for sale. So if you are listing a property for lease and it's a freehold property, you would select, of course, this second option here. But we're going to assume that we're listing a detached home for sale. So we're going to go ahead and click on listing sale freehold, and that's going to create all of the, that's going to create the transaction kit with all of the forms that you need to list this particular property. Again, this is a question I get a lot. Importing data. Where am I importing data from? Just leave that blank. As you can also see here in brackets, it says optional. So just leave that blank because we don't have an MLS number yet, right? You're going to be added as listing salesperson. And for our purposes today, because I'm showing this to you quickly, we're not going to use the wizard. So we're going to unselect that and we're going to click on create. So that's going to create our transaction kit. And we just have to give it a few minutes. And then as you can see over here on the sidebar on the right-hand side, we do have different options. So we're just going to jump right into forms. And you're going to see here what it is that you need in order to list a property. So you've got your listing agreement. So this is something that you would have hopefully already brought with you to the listing presentation. Hopefully it's already signed. I also bring or recommend bringing the MLS data information form. I bring it to show it to the sellers, but I'm not going to have it all filled out and ready to go. This is something that you can ask them to electronically sign afterwards. Make sure you're getting the listing agreement signed during the listing presentation and the working with a realtor. But you can go back to your computer to prepare the MLS data information form and then have them sign that later. So making sure that you've got at least the listing agreement and working with a realtor signed before you go ahead and complete the MLS data. Typically speaking, we're not going to have a schedule attached to the listing agreement unless you want to specify what services you're including, right? Such as professional photos, virtual tour, staging. If you have an agreement where maybe the seller is going to be, paying for the staging, then you might want to include that in a schedule. But typically speaking, we don't have one prepared. So you can either leave that there or delete it. You can always delete transaction forms by clicking on that menu bar and selecting delete. Otherwise, you do have the fintrac form. Of course, you're going to need to verify their photo ID when you are at that listing presentation. So that's something that you can report on the fintrac form as well. And again, up to you if you do that at the time of the listing presentation, actually filling out the fintrac form, or if you do that later. The seller property information statement is not something that's required. So it's available there if you want to give that to your seller to complete, but it's not mandatory. So the takeaway here is you need to have the listing agreement signed and the working with a realtor during that listing presentation. So let's just quickly click on the listing agreement because there's a couple of things that I just wanted to point out, which again come up when you're listing a property for the first time. So this is going to be between the brokerage and your clients, so the sellers, and it's going to be for the real property known as blank. So you would enter in the address there. And then of course you want to have the term. So the term will typically be, today's date, or you can date it for when you anticipate listing the property. So again, if you have a client who needs to, finish up some DIY projects, you can go ahead and put in the commencement date for 2 weeks from now. What you can do as well is up at the top, you do have these two circles. So you have the MLS listing agreement, and then you have the exclusive listing agreement. You can actually have them sign both circles, meaning and specifying, I should say, that maybe the exclusive listing agreement starts today and expires in 2 weeks, and then the MLS listing agreement will start in 2 weeks. So you can either have them sign both circles. You can also have two separate listing agreements signed, one exclusive and one MLS. Exclusive just means that you're allowed to start promoting the property before it actually hits MLS, right? You have this exclusive listing for 2 weeks that the public doesn't know about. You know about it. You're marketing it to your clients. You're marketing it to hopefully, your fellow Zolo agents, but it's not going to hit MLS until 2 weeks from now. So specify the dates up at the top if that's the situation, and then have the starting date as today's date. I know I'm getting questions about this. Let me see. Sign or initial. Yeah, so you can have them initial the two circles up at the top. They're also going to be initialing the second circle here where it says that they're not already a party to another listing agreement. Of course, you want to make sure that you're the only listing agent working with them, so you would have them initial this second circle. This first circle here is only if the term is for longer than 6 months. I mean, hopefully you get the listing for a period of 6 months. If it's longer than that, then have them initial this circle. But, especially in this market, I don't think it'll take you 6 months to sell a property. So, so just to reiterate, you're putting in the term, effective today's date, and then you're specifying up at the top for how long it's going to be exclusive and then when it's going to hit MLS. Of course, you're going to put in the purchase price, and of course, you're going to ask them to initial and verify that they're not a party to another listing agreement. All right, this is what I wanted to talk about because, yeah, questions always come up about this. So let's talk about the commission now. Let's just assume for a moment that you are going to be receiving 2.5% and you're going to be cooperating at 2.5%. So that means full pop 5% in total. So this is how you would fill that in. So the listing brokerage listing the property, the seller agrees to pay the listing brokerage a commission of blank. This is actually where you put in the total amount. So you put the total amount in first, and then if you continue reading, it says that we're offering to pay the cooperating brokerage a commission of 2.5%. So the takeaway here is that you're actually not specifying your commission. What you're doing is you're specifying the total commission, and then you're specifying what you're cooperating as. So in the example where you were only charging 1%, for example, right, it would be 1% for you plus 2.5 what you're offering a buyer's agent. So that's a total of 3.5. So that's what you would enter here instead of 5%. So if you are offering a discounted commission, you're not specifying 1%, you're specifying the total amount that they're going to pay and then what you're cooperating at. So again, that comes up in questions, which is why I wanted to address it. All right. All right, should we go with photo ID, name, or names on GeoWarehouse? Sometimes ID name is short form or spouse family name. Yeah, so definitely go with Geo. That's what's registered. Yes, as the, sorry, I didn't see who responded there. But yeah, definitely, yeah, just copy and paste from GeoWarehouse, right? That way, it's correct. Okay, so yeah, so those would be the names that you would put in as the seller here. So hopefully this answers questions about the commission, because yes, I know that that's a common error that the deals department sees all the time. So I just wanted to bring that up. So 3.5% if you're reducing your commission, or 4%, meaning that you're getting 2.5, right, for the buyer's agent, and you've reduced your commission by 0.5. So whatever it is, the total goes first, and then what you're cooperating at next. That is it for the listing agreement. That's kind of what comes up. And then last but not least, I wanted to show you the MLS data information form, because this is probably the longest form that you have to complete ever. It's not a lot of fun, but you want to be pulling information from GeoWarehouse. You want to be pulling information from, ask your sellers, talk to your sellers about this. You want to make sure that you have accurate information here. So as you can see, it is a really long form, and there are mandatory fields and optional fields. So the mandatory fields are highlighted for you in pink, meaning, that's all you have to complete. So yes, go to GeoWarehouse, get the roll number, the PIN number. It's actually optional, the PIN number, but make sure you're getting information from the correct source, right? MPAC is another report that you can purchase. It's $5 or $9, depending on which one you purchase, and that will verify square footage. I highly, highly recommend including square footage. I don't know why listing agents don't include that information. I actually don't know why it's not mandatory, but anyway, verify what the square footage is on MPAC, and that's going to be one of the many, many things that you have to fill in with this form. So this is something else that just takes time. So go ahead and enter in all of the information, all of these fields in pink. I'm just going to scroll through it so you can see what you're up against here. As I said, it's a lot of information. This is where you can put your remarks in that are going to be available to the public, remarks for brokers, especially if you're having offer instructions. That's where you'll want to include that. So make sure that you're including all of this information. If you have any questions about anything specifically, of course, we don't have the time here today for me to go over each field, but if you do have questions, do go over that with your growth manager or your team leader. As you can see down here at the bottom, you do have to get this signed by your sellers. Now here's my little trick, because I didn't know this existed. I was literally, having these completed and then copy typing everything again into Treb, which is not a lot of fun. So up here at the top, you can see this menu option, it says upload listing. If you click on that, it may not let me do it because I don't have any information in the form. But if you click on upload listing, it will actually create a draft in Treb for you so that you can basically, just verify that all the information is there and then upload your photos, upload that Schedule B and submit it, and that creates your MLS listing. So here at Zolo, we are uploading our own listings, which is why, it's so important to go over this. So yes, as you can see, I can't do this because I didn't fill out the form, but I will just quickly go into Treb, and I'm going to show you where that would have gone if a draft listing was created for me. So if we click on search properties, up here at the top, you have add edit. So this is, of course, the Matrix platform, but if you're on Stratus, this actually redirects me to Stratus anyway. So just click on add edit. And you have 4 tabs up here at the top. So add a listing, edit a listing, drafts, and clone listing. So if you had selected upload listing from your MLS data information form, you would actually see it under drafts. So you wouldn't have to recreate all of that information. You wouldn't have to input it all over again. So there you go. That's a shortcut for sure because you don't have to enter in all that information again. Now, let's talk quickly about canceling a listing. So let me just flip back to my slides here. And so bear with me. All right, so if you do need to change anything in your forms, of course, you need authorization for that. So we've already talked about the listing agreement. And yes, and of course, the MLS data information sheet. Now, if you were to amend the listing agreement, of course, you would need authorization from your seller. So don't just go ahead, don't just jump into Treb and edit a listing without being authorized to do so. So even though you've had a conversation with your sellers, even though you've been given verbal authorization to change the price, you do want to make sure that you have this paperwork signed. So it would be Form 240, Amendment to Listing Agreement, so that you can go in and edit that listing. So as you saw at the top there of my Treb screen, you can edit a listing. And now something else that I wanted to bring up as well, if you cancel a listing because, let's say, for example, you were holding off on offers, you didn't get the price you were hoping for, and maybe you want to cancel the listing altogether and relist it, then in that case, that's when you would use clone listing. So you wouldn't be adding a new listing. You can go ahead and basically copy the old MLS number, clone that listing, and then relist it. So any cancellations do require authorization by Kevin Ali, your managing broker, or your growth manager. So once it's canceled, once you have that paperwork completed and signed, if you need that canceled, send that to us. We'll cancel it for you, and then you can relist it on your own. All right. So let me know if you guys have questions about that. I know it's a lot, but I did just want to go through the paperwork and show you just some common mistakes the deals department is up against all the time, so that hopefully, those mistakes are not made. So let me know. Treb is very strict about editing the listings. What are the limitations and regulations for changing information? Yeah, so you're right. There are, of course, guidelines. It's available on Treb for you to look at if you have questions about anything. But yes, there are, of course, you need to have the paperwork in order. You need to be authorized to make any changes. In terms of limitations, I will talk about timelines a little bit, in the sense that if, for example, a property sells, you do have to change that information within 24 hours. So you don't want to have your listing sitting there for days and days and days. If it has sold conditionally, you must be updating that change in status. So yeah, there's different rules around that, but take a look at Treb for more information. All right. Okay. Let me know if there's any questions about listings. Again, I wanted that to be kind of the bulk of the presentation today, so that you knew how to do the paperwork and actually upload the listing once you have that the listing agreement signed. Once you get the yes from your sellers, you're their listing agent. I wanted you to know what to do next, because that's often the question. So you need your paperwork and you need to upload all of that information to Treb. So now let's assume that you've had that listing live, and we're we're not going to get into specifics about whether you were holding off on offers or whether you were accepting offers anytime. We're just going to, assume that you have an offer, and let's take a look at what happens in that particular case. So once you have an offer that has been accepted, of course, you want to email that accepted offer to the client and to the buyer's agent as well, right? So this is also a question that I get a lot, just about once an offer is accepted, how do I create a new signing in Authentisign? So if you need a refresher on any of that, please join us tomorrow for web forms. But basically, yes, you will need to, if you get an offer and it's accepted, you need to confirm the acceptance. You need to acknowledge receipt of an accepted copy. So just make sure you have that fully executed final offer. And if there are conditions in there, such as inspection or financing, which we're not seeing a lot of right now, but if that is the case, then of course the buyers will have typically 5 days, hopefully less than that, to confirm their financing. So it would be on the buyer's agent to confirm those, confirm the financing, make sure that the inspection is satisfactory, and if it is, you would be receiving a notice of fulfillment. But before that happens, of course, you need to verify that they delivered their deposit. Sometimes deals fall apart at that stage, so make sure that they have the deposit instructions. So as the listing agent, if you have an accepted offer, your next step should be to send the deposit instructions to the buyer's agent. That way they know where to go, how to deposit, the 50,000 or whatever it is. And it's going to be typically at, directly at RBC is what we're seeing most now. So once the buyers have done their due diligence, if there are any conditions, then yes, you would be receiving a notice of fulfillment. Make sure that lawyer information is exchanged. That sometimes, the deals department is always asking us for that. So make sure that you're, just updating everybody. And then of course, again, back to that question, you must update your MLS status to sold, right? Within 24 hours. So if it firms up, then that's great. You need to update that with the sold price right away. You can't have a listing sitting on there, generating leads for you if it's already sold. So it has to be updated. Of course, you then need to upload all of your documents to the checklist and web forms. So that's a long list of documents that you may or may not have, right? So if you don't have a waiver, for example, don't worry about that. It's there because if you do have it, there's a spot for you to upload it. But if you don't have it, then you just leave it blank. The deals department will take a look. They'll give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And then that's all they need from you. So in terms of marketing, you may want to send out, if you did send out a just listed, you might want to now send out a just sold to that particular area. So once it's under contract and once everything has been accepted and firmed up, those are the next steps. And then of course, closing. So again, just making sure that, lawyers have the information that they need. If there's, a mortgage broker involved, sending the MLS listing, that's usually on the buying side. So yeah, just making sure everybody has what they need, making sure that you've uploaded all of your forms to web forms and the checklist, and then just follow up, right? Following up, making sure everybody, is in the loop. And then of course, following up afterwards as well, right? Just to make sure that everything went smoothly. All right, so let me know if you guys have questions about listings. So there was, again, a lot of pieces when you're working with sellers. We didn't get into, commission and, the conversations that you have during the listing presentation. I'm kind of saving that for Thursday. So as I said, I will be joined by some of the team leaders here and the GM. So please join me on Thursday for that. But in the meantime, let's open it up. Let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, I'll go back to that slide for sure. So post-closing, if you want to take a look at that, I will leave that up. And then what I'll do is in a few seconds here, I'll just stop our share so that if you guys do want to chat with me, you can turn on your video and we can have a conversation about working with sellers and specifically listing properties and how we go about doing that. All right, before I do that, before I stop the share, I will just let you know that there are some resources available to you guys. So there's a bunch of information in the Academy. If you need to reach out to Realtor support, it's actually realtor_support@zolo.ca. Or if you have anything deal related specifically about sellers, then yes, you can reach out to your team leader. And yeah, this will be available on our YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube, of course, there's links to it, but really quickly, you can go to YouTube and you can search for Zolo training, and that's where all of this information is. So this one should be available usually within a couple of hours after the session ending. So let me just stop the share there, and let me know if you guys have any questions or comments or any issues that have come up recently with listings and working with sellers. I'm happy to help. Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, so I think I've addressed everybody's question in the chat. We still have some time, actually. I sped through that today. My pleasure, yeah. Perfect. So, all right. If there's nothing else, we can end it there. But please join us on Thursday, because we will be talking about listing strategies, what has worked, what hasn't. So, if you're getting commission objections, all that fun stuff, we can do a deeper dive into that on Thursday. In the meantime, thanks so much, you guys. Have a great day, and I hope that was informative. Yeah, you're welcome. All right. I'll see you guys on the next webinar. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.